The hangar smelled of oil, metal, and the faint tang of burnt rubber, a scent that somehow felt like home to Maya Keller. The massive doors groaned as they opened to the pre-dawn chill, letting in a gust of wind that sent her coveralls flapping against her skin. She knelt by the landing gear of a C-130 Hercules, wiping a bead of sweat mixed with engine grime from her forehead. Her hands were streaked with grease, her fingernails blackened, but her touch was precise, careful. Every bolt, every wire, every hydraulic line mattered. The lives of the crew depended on her. She didn't hear Brooks approach until his shadow fell across the concrete, the harsh fluorescent lights casting angular shapes on his uniform. His boots clanged against the floor with a rhythm that screamed authority he didn't really have, yet felt compelled to enforce. Maya didn't look up. "Hey," he barked, gesturing at her with a sharp nod. "We need this bird ready now. Can you hurry it up? You're just a mechanic, not command." The words were dismissive, heavy with condescension. Maya's fingers tightened around the wrench, pausing mid-turn. She inhaled slowly, the metallic taste of fear and fury mingling with the air around her. She didn't flinch, didn't glare, didn't defend herself. She simply said, in a voice almost too soft to hear, "I know what I am." Brooks scoffed, tossing a stray coil of cable aside. "Yeah, well, I guess just a mechanic isn't enough sometimes." He turned on his heel and left, shaking his head, muttering something about slow workers. Maya exhaled, letting the tension seep out of her shoulders. She returned to the hydraulic line, tightening it with methodical precision. Every movement was deliberate, fluid, practiced, almost choreographed. She had done this thousands of times, but today the air felt different. The hangar seemed heavier somehow, as if it remembered her. Her radio crackled, snapping her out of her thoughts. "Sergeant Keller, after you finish, report to Building 8. Command wants you." She froze, wrench midair. Command, for her. The words should have been ordinary, but in that moment they reverberated like the distant echo of a cannon. She swallowed and stood, brushing soot from her coveralls. Brooks, who had lingered near the exit, caught the tail end of the message, his brows knitted in disbelief. "Command," he muttered under his breath. "For her." No one at the base had ever thought much of Maya Keller. To most, she was invisible, a quiet woman in grease-stained coveralls, just another mechanic in the sprawling machinery of the military. But those who knew better, the ones who had survived the things she had survived, knew she was something else entirely. She gathered her tools and walked toward the exit. The hangar seemed to stretch endlessly before her, the deafening echoes of machinery and footsteps bouncing off the metal walls. Her boots clicked against the concrete in a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat, steady, controlled, but heavy with anticipation. Outside, the base was just beginning to wake. The morning sky was a pale gray, with streaks of violet and gold slicing through the horizon. Helicopters began their pre-flight checks in the distance. Jets roared as they taxied toward the runway. Maya's eyes scanned the familiar sights with detachment, though her mind was elsewhere, focused on Building 8. Brooks followed, curiosity gnawing at him like a persistent insect. "Why would command call a mechanic to the Medal of Honor wing?" he whispered to a friend walking beside him. "There's gotta be some kind of mistake." Maya overheard him but didn't react. She never reacted to ignorance. She had long ago learned that people's opinions were their own, and history would judge her differently. The walk across the base was long, but it gave her time to remember the day that had defined her life. The convoy ambush in Nuristan province, the screams, the fire, the shrapnel, the men she had pulled from the burning vehicles one by one while bullets whizzed past her. She had survived burns that should have ended her, injuries that would have killed anyone else. And yet she kept going, because leaving anyone behind was not an option. Brooks stopped a few yards back, watching her silhouette against the gray dawn. He had seen her before, yes, but only in passing, the quiet mechanic who fixed planes and never asked for attention. And yet, there was something in her gait, something in the way she held herself despite the long hours and grime, that now made him stop and rethink everything he thought he knew about her. The entrance to Building 8 loomed ahead, a tall, imposing structure of concrete and steel, its doors marked only with a subtle emblem of the Air Force. Few ever entered this place. Fewer still emerged unchanged. Maya's pulse quickened. She had been here before, in secret years ago, but only for herself, only for closure. As she stepped inside, the cool air hit her like a wall. The lighting was subdued, almost reverent. Rows upon rows of portraits and medals lined the walls, each one telling a story of courage, sacrifice, and sometimes tragedy. The whispers of history seemed to echo off the walls. Maya walked carefully, deliberately, aware that each step carried the weight of memory and expectation. Brooks slipped in unnoticed, drawn by a curiosity he could not suppress. He scanned the walls with awe, stopping at each photograph, each citation, each carefully preserved artifact. Then, in the middle of the wall, he saw it. Maya Keller, her face, youthful yet hardened by experiences Brooks could only imagine, stared back at him from a plaque adorned with the Medal of Honor. His breath caught in his throat. What is this?" he whispered. Maya didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on a sealed door at the far end of the room, guarded by 2 Marines. Her jaw tightened. Her hands, still clenched at her sides, trembled just slightly. She had always avoided this place, always avoided the reminders, but today it had found her again. Brooks stepped closer, heart hammering. Why is she on the wall? I don't understand." The air around them seemed to hum with tension. Maya's memories pressed against her mind, screams in the mountains, explosions, the feel of searing heat, the weight of lifeless bodies she had carried to safety. She had survived when others had not, and the world had moved on unaware. Until now. The Marines at the door stepped aside with a salute. Maya's hands clenched, her knuckles white. She walked forward, each step deliberate, each breath measured. Behind her, Brooks could only follow, his mind reeling. Because this was the moment when he realized something extraordinary about her, something he had never seen before, something the world had never truly witnessed. Part 1 ends with Maya stepping toward the sealed door, toward a past she had buried, and a future that would demand everything she thought she had left behind. Maya's boots echoed softly on the polished concrete floor of Building 8. Each step carried her deeper into a world she had long avoided. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and archival paper, a stark contrast to the engine oil and grease she was used to. She paused briefly at a row of portraits, each one framed in solemn reverence. Men and women who had sacrificed everything, their faces frozen in time, their stories etched forever into the heart of the nation. Brooks followed at a distance, still trying to process what he had seen on the wall, her name, her face, her citation among the most revered heroes in the United States. He kept glancing at her, searching for a clue, a sign, anything that might explain how this quiet mechanic had earned the Medal of Honor. She walked with a rhythm that was almost mechanical, but there was a tension beneath her calmness, an invisible weight pressing down on her shoulders. The corridor narrowed and the lighting dimmed, focusing on the artifacts displayed in glass cases along the walls. Burned boots, dented helmets, folded flags, each object a testament to courage and loss. Maya's eyes flicked over them briefly, lingering only on the ones that stirred memory. She clenched her fists slightly under her sleeves. Memories she had tried to bury threatened to surface. She had seen the horrors behind each medal, each citation, each artifact, and had learned early on that recognition often came at the cost of remembering too much. Brooks stepped carefully, careful not to draw attention to himself, but he couldn't stop his gaze from following her. He noticed the subtle tension in her shoulders, the way her jaw clenched slightly when she passed the artifact cases, the slight hitch in her breath as she approached the end of the hall. He realized something he hadn't before. Maya Keller carried a weight no one else could understand. He had dismissed her before, like so many others had, but now he saw it. She was not just a mechanic. She was something else entirely, something forged in fire and blood, tempered by loss and survival. As they approached the final set of doors, Maya's pace slowed. Two Marines stood guard, their postures rigid, expressions unreadable. They gave a crisp salute as she neared, and she responded with a slight nod, her eyes fixed straight ahead. She didn't see Brooks, who had stopped a few feet behind, his mouth slightly open in disbelief. The doors themselves were massive, reinforced steel, with a small plaque marking them as the entrance to the Medal of Honor wing. A place few ever entered, and even fewer ever left without feeling the weight of history pressing down upon them. The officer at the door stepped forward, a tall man with a calm authority in his presence. "Sergeant Keller," he said, voice steady, "thank you for coming. Command has requested your presence." Maya nodded, swallowing the sudden lump in her throat. She had been called here before, years ago, in classified circumstances. She knew the officer was right. This was not a routine call. Not for her. She had avoided this place for so long precisely because it forced her to confront everything she had survived, everything she had witnessed, and everything she had tried to leave behind. Brooks watched, barely breathing, as she stepped forward and the doors opened with a deep, echoing groan. Inside, the lighting was subdued but purposeful, spotlighting rows of portraits, artifacts, and folded flags. Each display told a story of courage, of sacrifice, of unimaginable bravery in the face of mortal danger. The quiet hum of the climate control system, the faint click of her boots on the floor, and the distant echo of her own heartbeat filled the space. Her eyes moved over the walls with precision, lingering only on the displays that mattered most to her. Burned helmets, scorched boots, dented radios, artifacts from her mission in Nuristan province. She had been here before, yes, but only in passing. Today, she had been called deliberately. Today, command wanted her to confront something she had buried deep inside herself. Brooks trailed behind her, barely daring to breathe. He could see it now, the tension in her shoulders, the barely controlled tremor in her fingers. This wasn't just a woman walking into a room. This was a survivor stepping into the echoes of her own history, a history most people could not comprehend. He saw her pause at a particular plaque, his breath caught. It was her own name, Maya Keller, Medal of Honor. His knees felt weak. He had stared at her all these years, never knowing, never imagining that the quiet mechanic he had dismissed was one of the nation's most decorated heroes. Her face stared back at him from the polished frame, eyes frozen in time, mouth set in the resolve that had carried her through fire and bullets and death. Brooks whispered, barely audible over the faint hum of the room, "How?" Maya didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her gaze was fixed on the sealed door at the end of the hall, guarded by two Marines. Her jaw tightened, her fists clenching and unclenching. This was what she had feared. This was the confrontation she had avoided for years. She had survived the battle in Nuristan, yes. She had pulled 12 men to safety under withering fire. She had endured burns and shrapnel injuries that would have killed most people. She had saved lives. But this room, this wall, this mission, it brought everything back. Brooks stepped closer, curiosity and awe battling with his own fear. He had never seen her like this. The woman he had called just a mechanic was now a figure of quiet intensity, a storm contained within a calm exterior. Every movement, every glance, every breath seemed measured, deliberate, heavy with memory. The Marines at the door stepped aside, their salutes crisp and precise. Maya walked forward, each step measured, deliberate, as if she were walking towards something she could not avoid. Brooks followed at a cautious distance, his mind reeling. How could someone survive what she had survived and remain so composed? The air seemed to thicken as they approached the door. The hum of the lights, the faint echo of her own heartbeat, the smell of polished wood and old paper, all of it pressed against her senses. She had avoided this place for years, precisely because it forced her to remember everything she had seen, everything she had endured, everything she had survived. Brooks finally understood. This was not a woman to be underestimated. Not by him, not by anyone. Maya Keller had survived where others had fallen. She had done the impossible, And now, as she approached the sealed door, the quiet storm within her threatened to break loose. Part 2 ends with Maya stepping toward the sealed door at the end of the hall, the Marine standing aside, and Brooks realizing that everything he thought he knew about her was about to change forever. Behind that door awaited a past she had tried to bury, and a truth that would challenge everything he and the rest of the base believed. The room beyond the sealed doors was dim, almost somber, lit by a single spotlight that fell over a display case at its center. The glow illuminated a scorched helmet, a twisted rifle, a half-melted radio, and a dented medical pouch, artifacts that seemed to hum with silent testimony. Each item told a story of chaos, courage, and survival. Each object carried the echo of screams, explosions, and the fleeting pulse of life. Maya stepped carefully, her boots clicking softly against the polished concrete floor. Every step brought a memory, a whisper of a past she had buried deep beneath layers of routine and discipline. Her chest tightened, and a subtle tremor ran through her fingers. She had avoided this place for years precisely because of this. These artifacts weren't just symbols. They were reminders of fire, of blood, of men she could not save, of missions she barely survived herself. Brooks lingered near the doorway, heart hammering, trying to take in the sight. He had known her as the quiet mechanic, the woman who fixed planes and never asked for recognition. And yet, here she was, standing at the threshold of her own history, her name etched into the wall of the nation's most revered heroes. The officer at the display case began to speak, his voice low, measured, and reverent. Sergeant Keller was just a mechanic. During the convoy ambush in Nuristan province, she saved 12 soldiers alone, operating for over an hour under direct fire. Brooks froze, his jaw slackened. Alone, how? The officer continued, eyes scanning the artifacts. The convoy was hit by an IED, followed by small arms fire. Vehicles were burning. Men were wounded, trapped, some pinned beneath twisted metal. Sergeant Keller ran through open terrain twice to pull each soldier to safety. She held off insurgents with a malfunctioning rifle, and when she ran out of ammunition, used a wrench, a simple tool, to defend herself. Brooks' stomach churned. He stepped closer, careful not to interrupt but unable to tear his eyes away from her. He realized in a cold shock that the woman he had mocked only hours ago had been more than extraordinary. She had been nearly superhuman. The officer's voice grew heavy, almost sorrowful. She suffered degree burns, a lung injury, and shrapnel near her spine. Doctors later said she should not have survived. Maya's jaw clenched tightly. Her eyes, however, remained fixed on the display case, on the burned helmet and melted radio, silent witnesses to a mission that had cost so much. She hated this room, hated being reminded, hated the way her own hands shook ever so slightly when confronted with proof of her past. Brooks took a step back, suddenly aware of the gravity in the air. He felt guilty for the words he had thrown at her hours before, dismissing her as just a mechanic. He realized now that she had lived through things he could not imagine, had carried burdens that no one else could see. She had saved lives, and yet she had never sought attention, never worn her heroism like a medal for others to admire. The officer paused, then continued, lowering his voice even further. Sergeant Keller did not accept the Medal of Honor publicly. The ceremony was classified for years. She refused to make it about herself. She accepted it for the men she saved, for the lives she preserved. Maya exhaled slowly, a bitter twist in her chest. She had survived the ambush, yes, but she had also carried the weight of every man who hadn't. The faces of those she couldn't save haunted her in quiet moments, and the idea of celebration, of acknowledgement, had always felt wrong. Brooks finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. Why would someone like her hide something like that? Maya didn't answer. She couldn't. Not yet. Not while the echoes of that day still clung to her. She ran her hand over the display case, fingers tracing the edge as though she could feel the heat of the fire, the sting of the shrapnel, the weight of the men she had carried. The officer glanced at her, then down at the artifacts. "We did not call you here to praise you," he said. "We called you because there are threats. The men you saved, someone is trying to expose classified details about the mission. We need your help." Maya stiffened. "Threats? Who?" Her voice was calm but cold, precise. Years of discipline sharpened her instincts, the kind that had saved lives in combat, and now, in the quiet, sterile environment of the museum-like room, they were alert again. "We don't know," the officer admitted, "but we believe the person has access to the files you worked on. Your after-action reports, your documentation, someone has compromised them." Maya's chest tightened. Her mind raced, replaying the ambush in Nuristan, the chaos, the fire, the faces of the men she had saved. The thought of someone exploiting that mission, twisting it, making it public, filled her with a cold, simmering rage. "They can't," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. "They cannot." Brooks watched her closely, a sense of awe growing in him. He had always underestimated her, and now he saw the quiet ferocity beneath the calm exterior. This wasn't a mechanic. This was a woman who had stared death in the face and survived. A woman who had carried the weight of others, lives on her shoulders, and refused to crumble. The officer stepped closer, voice dropping to a whisper. "We need you, Sergeant. The files are sensitive. If leaked, the families of the men you saved could be at risk, and so could you." Maya's eyes flicked toward him, steady and piercing. "I don't want to go back there," she said softly, almost pleading. "I refused to read those reports. I didn't want to remember." The officer nodded solemnly. "I know, but now there's no choice." Brooks felt a chill creep along his spine. He realized fully for the first time that Maya's calm demeanor, her quiet professionalism, her almost invisible presence, was a shield forged in fire and blood. She had survived impossible circumstances before. She had carried impossible weight. And now, the past she had tried to bury had returned. He looked at her face, sharp, determined, but with a glimmer of the haunted pain that only someone who had survived a battlefield could carry. He understood why she had never sought recognition, why she had kept her distance, why she had endured in silence. The officer handed her a sealed folder. "Open it. We need to know who accessed your after-action files. We need your insight." Maya stared at the folder, her fingers brushing the edge. Inside were photos, reports, witness statements, proof of her own heroism, proof of the lives she had saved, proof of the chaos she had survived, and worse, a proof that someone had accessed them without authorization. Her hands trembled slightly as she took it. Memories surged, like a tidal wave breaking over her carefully controlled composure. She had never wanted this. She had never wanted to relive that day, but the folder demanded it. It was a call to action she could not ignore. Brooks watched silently, realizing that this was the moment he would never forget. The woman he had once called just a mechanic was about to confront her past, not with bravado or theatrics, but with the quiet, lethal resolve of someone who had survived hell and returned stronger. Maya exhaled, steadying herself. Her eyes lifted, cold and sharp, and she whispered to herself, "I will not let them use it. I will not let them hurt them. Not again." The room seemed to grow heavier, the artifacts pressing in around her. The echoes of the ambush, the heat of the fire, the screams of the men she had carried, all of it surged through her mind. And yet, she stood firm, hands gripping the folder like a lifeline. Brooks realized then that her heroism was not just in the past. It was active, alive, and burning within her. The quiet mechanic had become a force he could barely comprehend, a survivor, a protector, a warrior forged in the crucible of war. Part 3 ends with Maya staring at the burnt helmet in the display case, whispers of the past surrounding her, and her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "Why are you making me see this again?" Maya's fingers rested lightly on the folder, the thin manila paper suddenly heavier than steel. Every word, every photograph, every line of typed testimony seemed to hum with latent danger. She could almost hear the echo of gunfire, the crackling flames, the distant screams from Nuristan province replaying in her mind. Her jaw clenched. She hadn't wanted to relive this, but now she had no choice. Colonel Abrams entered the room with a quiet authority that immediately commanded attention. His crisp uniform and precise movements betrayed decades of experience, yet his eyes were calm, almost gentle as they rested on Maya. "Sergeant Keller," he said, his tone low but firm, "we need to talk." Brooks stayed near the doorway, unnoticed. He watched, heart pounding, as Maya straightened, preparing herself for whatever was coming. She had learned long ago that when someone in command spoke this way, it was serious. The calm voice often carried more danger than shouted orders. Abrams' gaze shifted to the folder. "The men you saved, 2 of them were recently contacted by someone claiming to have details about your mission in Nuristan." Maya's pulse quickened, her eyes narrowed. "Details, classified details." He nodded gravely. "Yes. Someone is threatening to leak sensitive information. If they succeed, it could compromise ongoing operations and put both you and the families of the soldiers at risk." Her hands tightened around the folder, knuckles white. "Impossible," she whispered. "No one outside the chain of command should have access to those files." "Exactly," Abrams said, his voice steady. "Which is why we believe this person is within the base. And not just anyone, someone with high-level clearance, someone who knows how to bypass the system." Brooks felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Inside the quiet officer's words lay a truth more terrifying than anything Maya had faced in combat. The threat wasn't external. It was internal. Someone on the base had compromised her past, someone with access to secrets she thought were safe. Maya's jaw tightened. Her mind raced, replaying faces, assignments, shifts, and personnel she had encountered over the past year. She had always been meticulous, cautious, a necessity in both the field and in maintenance. And yet, someone had found a way in. Someone she didn't know, someone dangerous. Abrams took a step closer, lowering his voice. "We need your expertise, Sergeant. Your understanding of the mission, the files, and the way the convoy was handled. It's critical to track this person down before they cause irreparable damage." Maya shook her head slightly. "I don't want to go back there. I refused to read those reports for a reason. I didn't want to remember." Abrams' eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. "I know, but this isn't about what you want. This is about protecting lives. Those men you saved, their families, their safety depends on your cooperation." Brooks stepped a little closer, unable to resist. "Sergeant Keller, I didn't realize, I didn't know." His voice faltered. "I called you just a mechanic. I was wrong." Maya glanced at him, her eyes sharp but not unkind. "Apology noted," she said quietly. Her focus snapped back to Abrams. There was no room for sentiment now, there was only urgency. Abrams gestured to the folder. "Inside are the recent access logs, signatures, and anomalies. Someone accessed your after-action reports without authorization. We believe it was deliberate. We need your insight to identify them." Maya exhaled slowly. She opened the folder and began to sift through the documents. Photos, radio transcripts, witness statements, all evidence of the ambush, all reminders of the mission she had survived. And then, a signature she did not recognize. A digital fingerprint indicating someone had accessed the files recently. Her chest tightened. "This signature, it wasn't here before," she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. Her eyes narrowed, scanning the folder as if the paper itself might reveal the culprit. Abrams nodded gravely. "That's exactly what we feared. Whoever this is, they are close, too close. And they know enough to manipulate events if they aren't stopped." Maya's mind raced. The ambush had been chaos, fire, and death. But the threat now was quiet, invisible, and precise. Someone had infiltrated her past, and now they were threatening the present. She closed the folder slowly, her hands trembling just slightly. "I don't know who it is," she admitted softly, "but I'll find out. Whoever did this, they'll regret it." Brooks felt a mix of awe and fear. This wasn't just a mechanic, this was a warrior, a survivor. She had faced death on the battlefield, and now she was preparing to face it again in a different form. The calm determination in her eyes told him she would not fail. She could not fail. Abraham stepped back, respect in his gaze. "Good. We need you at your full capacity, Sergeant. The situation is delicate. If this leaks, it won't just be embarrassing. Lives will be at stake." Maya exhaled, the weight of responsibility settling over her shoulders like armor. She had survived bullets, fire, and chaos. She had saved lives when others had fallen. Now she would have to confront the threat within the walls of her own base. The past she had tried to bury was rising again, and this time it demanded action. Brooks realized, fully and finally, that Maya Keller was not just a mechanic. She was a force of nature, a woman forged in fire, carrying scars that most could never imagine. And now she was about to step into a battle that was as invisible and deadly as the ambush she had survived years ago. Maya's voice dropped to a quiet, deadly whisper. "I will not let them hurt them. Not again." The officer nodded. "We've secured surveillance, logs, and personnel lists. You'll have access to everything you need, Sergeant. But be cautious. Whoever did this is clever, patient, and dangerous, and they know you better than anyone else." Maya's hands closed around the folder again, knuckles white. She stood taller, spine rigid. Her eyes flicked briefly to Brooks, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. She didn't need words, he understood now. She had survived impossible odds before, and she would survive this too. Abraham's voice cut through the tension. "Sergeant Keller, can I count on you?" Maya's gaze hardened, eyes sharp, unwavering. "Yes," she said, almost to herself. "I'll find them. Whoever they are, they won't get away with this." Brooks exhaled quietly, a mix of relief and fear flooding through him. He had underestimated her once, but he would never make that mistake again. She wasn't just a mechanic. She wasn't just a soldier. She was Maya Keller, a survivor, a hero, and now the one standing between a dangerous secret and disaster. The tension in the room was palpable. Every artifact, every photograph, every plaque seemed to lean forward, as if the very walls were aware of the storm about to unfold. Maya's resolve was steel, tempered by fire and forged in the chaos of Nuristan. The quiet hero who had hidden in plain sight was now stepping into a mission that would test her in ways the battlefield never had. Part 4 ends with Abrams leaving the room, the folder in Maya's hands, and her gaze settling on the photographs of her fallen comrades, a silent vow burning in her eyes. "I will protect them, no matter the cost." Folder felt heavier in Maya's hands than any wrench she had ever lifted. It wasn't the paper that weighed her down, it was the memories contained within. Every photograph, every document, every log entry was a shard of a past she had spent years trying to lock away. She sat at the edge of a polished oak table in the Medal of Honor wing, the ambient hum of climate control around her doing nothing to drown out the sound of her own heartbeat. Brooks lingered behind her, silent, unsure whether to intervene or simply bear witness. He had watched her handle crises before, but this was different. There was a fragility in her posture, a tension that belied the steel he had seen in combat reports, the kind of determination that had earned her the Medal of Honor. He had no idea what he would do if faced with this past, this personal reckoning. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she flipped open the top of the folder. Photographs spilled out first, burned vehicles, scorched uniforms, faces of men she had saved and some she had not. The images brought a sharp ache to her chest, the old guilt and grief gnawing at her resolve. She had survived when others hadn't, a fact that had always haunted her. Next came the logs, after-action reports she had never fully read herself, radio transcripts, coordinates, timelines. Everything was meticulously documented, cold and clinical on the page, yet beneath the ink and numbers was chaos, terror, and courage. She had written these reports under orders, detailing every moment of the convoy ambush in Nuristan province, every shot fired, every man pulled from burning vehicles. Then she saw it, an anomaly, a digital signature in the access logs that shouldn't exist. Someone had opened her restricted files, someone who shouldn't have had the clearance, someone who had combed through her private reports with deliberate intent. Her pulse quickened. The air in the room seemed suddenly thick. She traced the signature with a gloved finger, eyes narrowing. This wasn't here before, she whispered. The words trembled with a mix of fear, anger, and recognition. Brooks leaned closer, voice low. "Sergeant, what is it?" Maya didn't answer immediately. Her mind raced, replaying every personnel interaction, every report she had submitted, every time she had trusted someone with a detail of her past. The intruder was patient, clever, and deliberate. Someone she had worked alongside, someone with intimate knowledge of her life and habits. She exhaled slowly, forcing herself to focus. This wasn't just about the documents, it was about the men she had saved. Their families could be at risk. She couldn't allow these files to fall into the wrong hands. Not now, not ever. The folder also contained witness statements. Soldiers who had survived the ambush had recounted events that only she could verify. Their reports, though concise, revealed discrepancies, subtle contradictions in the narratives, the kind that only someone with access to her detailed logs could manipulate. Someone was rewriting history for reasons unknown. Maya's fingers tightened around the folder. Her knuckles turned white as a familiar anger surged through her, the kind born from betrayal and fire. She had fought for these men once. She had risked her life to save them. Now, someone was trying to undo that, to exploit it. Brooks shifted slightly, concern etched across his face. "Sergeant, are you okay?" She looked up at him, eyes sharp, unwavering. "I'm fine," she said, voice calm but edged with steel. I need to figure out who did this, and I will." Abraham's earlier words echoed in her mind. The intruder was just someone on the base. They were clever, patient, dangerous, and intimately familiar with her work. Maya's eyes scanned the folder again, looking for patterns, clues, anything that could point to the culprit. Then she saw it. A timestamp, a location, a pattern of access. Someone had been meticulous, opening her reports late at night when few were on the base. Someone who knew exactly when she had submitted the files, someone who understood the system intimately. Her stomach tightened. The realization was chilling. The intruder wasn't just a rogue hacker. This was someone inside the base, someone who had clearance, someone she might have worked alongside. Brooks noticed the change in her posture, the quiet, deadly precision that had always made her a formidable mechanic and a survivor. You think it's someone here?" he asked, barely able to form the words. Maya's eyes met his, unwavering and cold. "Yes, and they are dangerous, very dangerous. I don't know who, but I will find out." Her gaze returned to the photographs of her past, the burned vehicles, the scorched boots, the faces of men she had carried to safety. She felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle over her shoulders, heavy and unyielding. The past was no longer just memory. It was active, and it demanded action. The intruder's audacity was infuriating. They had accessed her files without authorization, violated her privacy, and threatened the safety of the men she had sworn to protect. She had survived bullets, fire, and explosions. She had carried men across burning terrain. And now, she would survive this. Maya organized the documents methodically, her movements precise and calculated. She cross-referenced the timestamps with personnel logs, access points, and recent movements within the base. The intruder had been clever, but she was cleverer. Years of field experience, years of surviving ambushes and betrayals had honed her instincts. Brooks watched silently, realizing fully now the depth of her capability. She wasn't just a mechanic, she wasn't just a soldier. She was a strategist, a survivor, a force forged in fire. He had underestimated her, and now he could only bear witness to her genius and determination. As Maya worked through the folder, a single name began to emerge from the chaos of signatures and timestamps. One person's access patterns aligned suspiciously with the times the intruder had penetrated the files. Someone familiar, someone trusted, someone close. Her heart raced, but her expression remained controlled. She had faced impossible odds before, and she would face this one. The stakes were high: exposure of classified information, potential risk to lives, the betrayal of trust. But she had never backed down from a challenge. She wouldn't start now. Finally, she closed the folder with a decisive snap. "I have a lead," she said, her voice low but steady. "It's not certain yet, but I know where to start." Brooks stepped forward, concern etched on his face. "Sergeant, be careful, whoever did this." "I will," Maya interrupted, her eyes cold and unwavering. "They won't get away with this, not on my watch." The room seemed to hold its breath as she stood, the weight of her past and the threat of the present coalescing into a single, unyielding resolve. The quiet hero, the woman Brooks had called just a mechanic, was ready to confront a danger that lurked closer than anyone could imagine. Part 5 ends with Maya rising from the table, the folder in hand, eyes steeled with determination. She whispers to herself, voice sharp and resolute. "Someone on this base accessed my classified file, and I'm going to find out who." The evening shadows stretched across the base like ink, long and dark, as Maya moved silently through the deserted corridors. The polished floors reflected the glow of overhead lights, flickering faintly like distant stars. The folder remained clutched tightly in her hands, its contents organized and cross-referenced. Every signature, timestamp, and anomaly had been scrutinized. One pattern emerged from the chaos: a name, a familiar one, someone she had worked alongside countless times. Her pulse quickened. The revelation was chilling. The intruder wasn't a stranger, wasn't some external hacker. It was someone inside the base, someone trusted, someone dangerously close. She remembered the person vividly: Lieutenant Garrett Hayes. Sharp, unassuming, polite, the kind of man who could smile at you in the morning and betray you by night. He had been assigned to assist with logistics for the Nuristan mission reports, had access to the secured servers, and had moved with calculated precision over the past months. Maya's jaw tightened. Garrett Hayes. She had seen him joking with others, making casual remarks about efficiency, teamwork, and trust. But behind the easy smile lay meticulous planning. Someone who had studied her, waited for the right opportunity, and now threatened not just her reputation, but the lives of the soldiers she had saved. She moved through the hallways with practiced stealth, boots clicking softly against the floor. Every shadow, every corner felt like a potential trap. She had survived ambushes, but the tension now was different. This was inside her own home, within the walls she thought were safe. Brooks followed discreetly, trying to stay out of her way but unable to hide his concern. He had never seen her like this, so deliberate, so focused, yet so tense. Every step was calculated, every glance scanning for potential threats. He realized fully now why she had earned the Medal of Honor. Survival wasn't just luck, it was instinct, experience, and relentless focus. Maya reached the server room where the anomalies had originated. The door was locked, but she had access. She swiped her ID badge, entering silently. The room hummed with electronics, the servers glowing like eyes in the dark. She moved quickly, accessing the logs directly. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, cross-referencing access points, timestamps, and encryption keys. There it was, Garrett Hayes. The evidence was irrefutable. Accessed without authorization, downloaded files late at night, manipulated timestamps, and attempted to cover his tracks. The intruder wasn't just clever, he was audacious, bold, and dangerous. Maya's fists clenched at her sides. She had confronted threats before: ambushes, insurgents, explosions, but this was personal. This was someone she had trusted, someone she had worked alongside, someone who now threatened everything she had survived to protect. Brooks leaned closer, whispering, He's on the base, right now." Maya's eyes didn't leave the screen. "Yes, and he knows I'm onto him. That's why he won't be careful anymore. He's desperate, and desperate people make mistakes." She traced the digital footprints with precision, mapping his movements across the base. Every entry, every exit, every suspicious interaction fell into place. The intruder was clever, but he hadn't anticipated her. Garrett Hayes had underestimated Maya Keller, a mistake he would soon regret. Her mind raced with options. Confront him directly, too risky. Alert command, they might be compromised. Set a trap. Yes, that was the only way. She needed him to make a move, to reveal his intentions, to expose himself completely. Maya's hands worked quickly, setting up monitoring protocols across the network. Cameras, access points, communications. She created a digital net that would catch him the moment he slipped. Every keystroke, every movement would be recorded. Every lie, every attempt to cover his tracks would be exposed. Brooks watched silently, awe and fear coiling in his chest. He realized fully now the depth of her abilities. She was not just a hero of the battlefield. She was a strategist, a warrior in her own right, capable of navigating danger with precision and calm that few could match. Hours passed. The base was quiet, the shadows long, the night heavy. Maya monitored the activity, waiting, calculating, predicting. And then a movement. Hayes. He was attempting to access another secure terminal, trying to cover his tracks, unaware that every keystroke was being observed. Maya's pulse quickened, but her movements remained steady. She traced his IP, his location, his access attempts. She could almost hear his thoughts through the patterns he left behind, confident, meticulous, arrogant. He thought he was untouchable. He had no idea she was watching. Brooks whispered, "This is insane. How are you so calm?" Maya didn't respond immediately. Her eyes never left the screen. "Calm, I'm focused," she said finally. "This isn't about me. It's about protecting the men I saved. If he succeeds, if he leaks those files, lives will be at risk. I can't let that happen." The intruder paused, hesitated, then tried a backdoor entry. Maya caught it instantly, locking it down, redirecting the attempt into a monitored sandbox. Hayes didn't realize he was trapped yet. His every action was now visible to her. The realization hit Brooks like a punch. He had underestimated her, again. Maya Keller wasn't just a survivor, she was a hunter, patient, relentless, and deadly. She had survived hell once. She would survive it again, and this time she would choose the battlefield. Suddenly, the terminal beeped an alert. Hayes had attempted physical access to the server room, trying to bypass electronic security. Maya's eyes narrowed. He was taking the risk because he knew he was running out of time. She slipped on her jacket, moving with the silent efficiency of a soldier accustomed to danger. Brooks followed instinctively, heart hammering, realizing they were walking into a confrontation he could not predict. Every shadow, every corner, every faint echo of footsteps was a potential threat. Maya's mind replayed the ambush in Nuristan. Explosions, fire, chaos. She drew strength from it now. She had survived impossible odds before, and she would survive this. She would catch him. She would protect the men whose lives he threatened, and she would not fail. The server room door loomed ahead. She could hear faint noises inside, the shuffle of boots, the click of equipment, the soft rustle of movement. Garrett Hayes. He didn't know she was ready. He didn't know she had predicted every move. He didn't know she had survived worse than this, countless times over. Maya tightened her grip on the folder in her hand, determination hardening her expression. "It ends tonight," she whispered to herself. "No one betrays them. No one threatens the men I saved. Not now, not ever." Brooks felt the tension in the air like electricity, ready to ignite. He realized fully now that she was not just a hero of the past. She was a force of nature, unstoppable, precise, and dangerous when roused. And she was about to confront a threat closer than anyone had imagined. Part 6 ends with Maya poised at the server room door, folder in hand, ready to confront Garrett Hayes. Every shadow, every sound is a potential threat, and the moment of confrontation is imminent. Maya's hand hovered over the server room door handle. Her breath was measured, controlled, but every fiber of her body was coiled like a spring, ready to strike. Brooks remained just behind her, trying to steady his own nerves. He had witnessed bravery before, but nothing like this. The quiet, lethal focus of a woman who had survived Nuristan, who had carried men across burning terrain, now poised to confront betrayal from within the walls of the base itself. She took a step back, closing her eyes for a moment, summoning the calm precision she had relied on countless times before. Every ambush, every firefight, every narrow escape from death had taught her to anticipate, to calculate, to move before her adversary even knew she existed. Garrett Hayes didn't stand a chance. With a swift motion, she pushed the door open, slipping inside like a shadow. The room was dimly lit, the hum of servers filling the air with an almost oppressive energy. Screens glowed faintly, casting an eerie light across Hayes' face as he crouched near a terminal, oblivious to the eyes watching him. Maya's presence was sudden, silent, a predator closing in on prey. Hayes froze mid-movement, eyes widening as he registered her in the doorway. "Maya Keller," he said, voice tight, trying to mask panic with arrogance. "I didn't expect." "You underestimated me," Maya interrupted, voice low, sharp, and cold. Every syllable carried the weight of someone who had stared death in the face and survived. "I knew you'd try. I just needed to catch you." Hayes swallowed, stepping back, his hands raised slightly in a gesture that was both defensive and futile. "Look, I didn't mean any harm. You accessed my files without authorization," Maya said, taking a step closer. Her eyes locked on his, unflinching, deadly. "You put lives at risk, families at risk. And for what? Power, recognition, revenge." Hayes faltered, his mouth opening, closing. Maya's gaze never wavered. "Explain it," she commanded. "Now." Hayes hesitated. He realized the situation had escalated beyond anything he had anticipated. He wasn't dealing with a soldier of routine skill, nor a mechanic of casual competence. He was confronting someone whose mind was sharpened by battlefield survival, whose instincts were honed by years of fighting for life itself. I just wanted to expose the truth," he stammered. "Everyone talks about your mission, your heroics. I wanted to show that you were ordinary." Maya's laugh was cold, hollow. "Ordinary?" she echoed. "Do you see these scars?" She gestured to her arms subtly where faint burn marks lingered. "Do you see the men I carried across burning vehicles? Do you hear the screams that still haunt me at night? I don't need your validation. I didn't survive Nuristan to prove myself to you. I survived to save lives. That's the difference between you and me." Brooks felt a shiver run down his spine. The woman in front of him wasn't just formidable. She was terrifying in her precision, in the sheer weight of her presence. Hayes realized, too late, that he had walked into a storm he could not comprehend. Maya's movements were fluid, controlled, but every step carried authority. She circled him slowly, folder in hand, each movement calculated to dominate the space, to assert total control. Hayes flinched with every step, his bravado crumbling under the intensity of her gaze. "You've endangered everyone connected to me," she continued, voice rising slightly. "And for what? A few files, a few headlines. Lives are at stake, Hayes, and now you're going to fix this or face consequences far worse than you can imagine." Hayes swallowed hard. I can delete them, I can." "No," Maya interrupted sharply. "You will not touch a thing until I am done here. Every action you take will be observed. Every step you make will be anticipated. You've been clever, but not clever enough." She turned to the terminal, her fingers flying across the keyboard. With practiced precision, she set a full monitoring protocol, tracking his every movement, his every attempt to interfere. Hayes tried to edge toward the server again, but Maya's shadow fell over him like a steel curtain. "Step back," she commanded. "You are done, you are finished." Hayes froze, the reality of his situation settling over him like a vice. He realized he had underestimated her in every possible way: skill, intelligence, instincts, resolve. She was not the mechanic he had casually dismissed. She was a survivor, a strategist, a predator honed by war. Maya's eyes locked on his again, unwavering. "Do you understand what you've done?" she asked quietly. "Do you understand the lives you've endangered?" Hayes nodded, barely able to speak. "Yes, I didn't think." "You didn't think," Maya repeated, voice rising, controlled but cutting. "And now you will think. You will answer for this. Every life you put at risk, every family that could have been harmed. You're going to fix it, or you're going to pay the consequences." Hayes' shoulders slumped. The fight drained from him. He had assumed cunning and manipulation would suffice, but he had misjudged her entirely. Maya Keller had survived fire, chaos, and death. She would survive this, and he would not escape accountability. Brooks stepped closer, still on edge but trusting her completely. He understood now that confrontation wasn't a gamble for her. It was inevitable. She had anticipated every scenario, every potential move. Hayes' fate was sealed the moment he accessed her files. Maya leaned close, voice dropping to a whisper that carried lethal intensity. "I don't want to ruin your life unnecessarily," she said. "But if you try anything else, if you attempt to compromise even one more file, I promise you, it will be the last mistake you ever make." Hayes nodded quickly, silent, terrified. His arrogance and bravado had dissolved completely. He realized fully now that he had walked straight into the storm and had no hope of escape. Maya stepped back, her eyes sweeping the room. Every server, every screen, every log entry was secure. Hayes had been neutralized as a threat, at least for now. She felt the familiar surge of satisfaction that came from a job well done, but it was tempered by the knowledge that danger never truly ended. Brooks let out a slow breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "That was intense," he muttered. Maya didn't respond immediately. Her eyes remained on Hayes, who sat frozen, his expression one of defeat and fear. She had survived worse than this, countless times, and yet the principle remained the same: protect the innocent, neutralize the threat, and never let the past endanger the present. Finally she exhaled and turned to Brooks. "It's done for now, but this isn't over. Threats like this, they come in waves. I'll need to remain vigilant." Brooks nodded, awe evident in his expression. You really are something else." Maya allowed a faint smile, brief and almost imperceptible. "I'm just someone who's survived," she said quietly. "And I won't let anyone, not even someone I thought I could trust, endanger those I've fought for." Part 7 ends with Maya standing over Hayes, the threat neutralized for the moment, but the shadow of vigilance heavy over her shoulders. The tension is high, but the victory is hers, fleeting, yet powerful, as the storm of danger has passed for now. The first rays of dawn crept across the base, filtering through the tall windows of the Medal of Honor wing. Dust motes floated in the golden light, suspended like fragile memories, as if the universe itself were holding its breath. Maya stood alone in the quiet corridor, the folder still in her hands, but now empty. Its contents had been secured, reviewed, and locked down. The threat had been neutralized, but the tension remained, a shadow that would linger long after the intruder was gone. Brooks approached cautiously, his footsteps echoing softly against the polished floor. He had been at her side through the confrontation, a witness to her lethal precision, her calm resolve, and her unwavering focus. Yet even he could not fully comprehend the depth of the storm she had weathered, and the storm she had survived long before he ever met her. "You handled that beautifully," he said quietly, not wanting to disturb the fragile quiet of the early morning. Maya didn't respond immediately. Her gaze drifted to the Medal of Honor wall, where names glimmered faintly in the soft light. Among them her own name was etched, a stark, silent testament to courage, sacrifice, and survival. She hadn't sought recognition. She had accepted the honor quietly, privately, for the lives she had saved. And yet, standing here now, the wall seemed to whisper to her, acknowledging not just the heroics but the cost, the weight, and the relentless responsibility of survival. "I didn't do it for recognition," she said softly, her voice carrying the quiet gravitas of someone who had stared death in the face and returned. "I did it because someone had to, because lives depended on it. That's always been enough for me." Brooks nodded, understanding now the depth of her integrity, the reason she had never flaunted her heroism, the reason she had remained just a mechanic to everyone else. There was power in silence, he realized, a power that only those who had truly faced mortality could understand. The base was waking slowly now, soldiers moving with purpose, unaware of the crisis that had unfolded overnight. Hayes had been reassigned under strict supervision, his attempts at subversion documented and contained. Maya had secured every loose end, but the lesson lingered. Vigilance was never optional. Trust was fragile, and the past, no matter how carefully buried, could resurface at any moment. Maya turned away from the wall, her gaze lingering briefly on the photographs of Nuristan province, the burned vehicles, the scarred terrain, the faces of men she had saved and those she had not. Pain, loss, and courage intertwined in her memory like the threads of an intricate tapestry. She had survived fire and chaos, yes, but she carried their echoes within her, reminders of why she had been called to action, why she had been tested, and why she had endured. Brooks watched silently, sensing that this quiet moment was as much about reflection as it was resolution. Maya had faced betrayal, danger, and exposure of her past, yet she remained unbroken. Her resilience was palpable, almost tangible, a force field forged in fire and blood, unyielding and unrelenting. "Do you ever regret it?" Brooks asked hesitantly, voice low. "All of it, the missions, the danger, the sacrifices." Maya's eyes met his, steady and unwavering. She considered the question carefully, weighing each word. "No," she said finally. "Not the missions, not the danger, not the sacrifices. Every life saved, every man pulled from the fire, that makes it all worth it. The rest, the fear, the pain, the nights I can't sleep, that's the cost, and it's a price I'll pay every time." There was a quiet dignity in her words, the kind that only someone who had survived unimaginable circumstances could convey. Brooks realized that her heroism wasn't just in the acts themselves, but in the relentless bearing of their consequences. She didn't seek glory. She didn't crave recognition. She simply carried the weight of survival, honor, and duty with unshakable resolve. Maya placed the folder carefully back on the table. It was empty now, its secrets secured. She felt the weight of the past and the present settle into a strange equilibrium, not closure exactly, but a temporary peace. The storm had passed for now, but vigilance would always be necessary. Threats could arise anywhere, and trust would always be tested. Brooks stepped closer, hesitant. "You know, most people would have crumbled," he said quietly. "After everything, facing a threat like Hayes, I don't know if I could have done what you just did." Maya allowed herself a faint smile, almost imperceptible, touched with both humor and sorrow. "Most people haven't survived what I have," she said softly. "And those who have, we don't crumble, we adapt. We endure, we survive." The corridor remained quiet, the early morning light casting long, soft shadows across the polished floor. Outside, the base was alive again, soldiers unaware of the crisis averted, unaware of the silent vigilance of a woman who had saved lives twice over, once in combat, and once against betrayal within the very walls she called home. Maya walked to the exit, her boots clicking softly. She paused briefly at the threshold, looking back at the Medal of Honor wall. The names shimmered faintly in the morning light. She traced her fingers along the etched letters of her own name. There was no fanfare, no applause, just quiet recognition, honor in silence, and the knowledge that she had fulfilled her duty once again. Brooks fell in step beside her. He was still in awe, still processing the intensity of what he had witnessed. "What now?" he asked, genuinely curious, though part of him feared the answer. Maya's gaze swept across the base, calm, alert, resolute. "Now," she said softly, "now we watch, we protect, we remain vigilant. The past has a way of resurfacing when you least expect it, but I'll be ready, always." She stepped out into the light, the first rays of the sun illuminating her determined face. The wind caught her hair, carrying it back like a banner of silent defiance. She had faced death in its many forms, confronted betrayal, survived chaos, and yet here she stood, unbroken, unyielding, and resolute. Brooks looked at her and realized that calling her just a mechanic had been the gravest mistake of his life. She was a warrior, a survivor, a hero in every sense, carrying both her past and present with unwavering strength. And though the danger had passed for now, he knew one thing with certainty. Wherever Maya Keller went, vigilance, courage, and honor followed, and anyone foolish enough to threaten that would face the full force of her resolve. Part 8 closes with Maya walking away from the Medal of Honor wall into the sunrise, folder secured, eyes forward, and a faint whisper carried on the wind. "I survived the battlefield. I survived betrayal. I will survive anything, and I will protect them always."